adyatam nityam. Second. Nityam sad asad atmakam pradanam prakritim prahur abhisesam viseshavat. And the translation is, the Supreme Personality of Godhead said, the unmanifested eternal combination of the three modes is the cause of the manifest state and is called pradhana. It is called prakriti when in the manifested stage of existence. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada. The Lord points out material, the Supreme Personality of God has said the unmanifested eternal combination of the three modes is the cause of the manifest state and is called pradhana. It is called prakriti when in the manifested stage of existence. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The Lord points out material nature in its subtle stage, which is called pradhana, and he analyzes this pradhana. The explanation of pradhana and prakriti is that pradhana is the subtle, undifferentiated sum total of all material elements. Although they are undifferentiated, one can understand that the total material elements are contained therein. When the total material elements are manifested by the interaction of the three modes of material nature, the manifestation is called prakriti. Impersonalists say that Brahman is without variegatedness and without differentiation. One may say that pradhana is the Brahman stage, but actually the Brahman stage is not pradhana. Pradhana is distinct from Brahman because in Brahman there is no existence of the material modes of nature. One may argue that the Mahatattva is also different from pradhana because in the Mahatattva there are manifestations. The actual explanation of pradhana, however, is given here when the cause and effect are not clearly manifested or avyakta. The reaction of the total elements does not take place, and that stage of material nature is called pradhana. Pradhana is not the time element because in the time element there are actions and reactions, creation and annihilation, nor is it the jiva or marginal potency of living entities or designated conditioned and living entities because the designations of the living entities are not eternal. One adjective used in this connection is nitya, which indicates eternality. Therefore, the condition of material nature immediately previous to its manifestation is called pradhana. Okay, so let's read this verse again. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Yatat Tri Gunam Avyaktam Nityam Sad Asad Atmakam Pradhanam Bhakritim Rahur Abhishesam Viseshavat. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, the unmanifested eternal combination of the three modes is the cause of the manifest state and is called pradhana. It is called prakriti when in the manifested stage of existence. Okay. All right, so here, this verse is speaking about the material nature in its subtle stage. And that's called pradana. And he's analyzing this pradana, subtle stage of material nature. So there's pradana and there's prakriti. Pradana is the subtle stage of material nature, or the undifferentiated subtotal of all material elements. So that stage of undifferentiated, let's say, material elements, in that stage, one can understand that the total material elements are contained in that stage. When the total material elements are manifested by the interaction of the three modes of material nature, then that manifestation is called prakriti. Impersonalists say that Brahman is without variegatedness and without differentiation. One may say that pradana is the Brahman stage, but actually the Brahman stage is not pradana. Pradana is distinct from Brahman because in Brahman there is no existence of the material modes of nature. One may argue that the Mahatattva is also different from pradana because in the Mahatattva there are manifestations. The actual explanation of pradana, however, is given here. When the cause and effect are not clearly manifested, it's called avyakta, the reaction of the total elements does not take place. And that stage of material nature is called pradana. Pradana is not the time element because in the time element there are actions and reactions, creation and annihilation. Nor is it the jiva or marginal potency of living entities or designated conditions of living entities, because the designations of the living entities are not eternal. One adjective used in this connection is nitya, which indicates eternality. Therefore, the condition of material nature immediately previous to its manifestation is called pradana. Okay, so now we're learning what you would call the nitty-gritty of the material creation. And there are a lot of scholarly points that have to be understood of the creation of material nature. So that's why it says in the purport, the Lord points out material nature in its subtle stage, which is called pradana, and he analyzes this pradana. Okay, so everything comes from the subtle to the gross. That's the way material nature is functioning. It begins very subtly, and little by little, it manifests grossly. So when something is subtle, it means that you cannot see it. And when it's gross, you can see it. So the Lord points out material nature in its subtle stage, which is called pradana, and he analyzes this pradana. The explanation of pradana and prakriti is that pradana is the subtle, undifferentiated sum total of all material elements. Although they are undifferentiated, one can understand that the total material elements are contained therein. When the total material elements are manifested by the interaction of the three modes of material nature, the manifestation is called prakriti. Impersonalists say that Brahman is without variegatedness and without differentiation. One may say that Pradhana is the Brahman stage, but actually the Brahman stage is not Pradhana. Pradhana is distinct from Brahman because in Brahman there is no existence of the material modes of nature. One may argue that the Mahatattva is also different from the Pradhana because in the Mahatattva there are manifestations. The actual explanation of Pradhana, however, is given here. When the cause and effect are not clearly manifested, in other words, that's called avyakta stage, the reaction of the total elements does not take place, and that stage of material nature is called Pradhana. Pradhana is not the time element, because in the time element, there are actions and reactions, creation and annihilation. Nor is it the jiva or marginal potency of living entities or designated conditioned living entities, because the designations of living entities are not eternal. One adjective used in this connection is nitya, which indicates eternality. Therefore, the condition of material nature immediately previous to its manifestation is called pradhana. Okay, that's very good. Okay. Differentiation between the pradhana and the prakriti. Everything starts from the subtle stage and it gradually evolves into the manifest stage. So to understand the material nature immediately previous to its manifestation, that's what is called pradhana. So everything begins subtly and it advances to be materially manifest. That means that the origin of things is something that you cannot perceive, but gradually, as it progresses, you're able to see it. So this pradhana stage it is what you would call the condition of material nature immediately previous to its manifestation. That's called pradhana. Okay. So everything begins subtly and eventually becomes manifest. So the condition of material nature immediately previous to its manifestation is called pradhana. Okay, text number 11. Unless there's any questions about this verse.
Hare Krishna Maharaji.
Yes.
Can you please, is it possible to give practical example to understand pradhan and prakruti, aprakruti?
Okay, so pradhana is what you would call the unmanifested eternal combination of three modes. Is the cause of the manifest state, and it's called pradhana. It is called prakriti when in the manifested stage of existence. So before material nature is manifested, and before the three modes of material nature begin to act, that state is called pradhana. So you see, everything begins in a subtle stage and eventually evolves to be manifest. So what is that subtle stage? It's called pradana. And what is it exactly? Well, that's what's being explained here. The actual explanation of pradana, however, is given here when the cause and effect are not clearly manifested. That stage is called avyakta. The reaction of the total elements does not take place. And that stage of material nature is called pradana. Pradana is not the time element because in the time element, there are actions and reactions, creation and annihilation, nor is it the jiva or marginal potency of living entities or designated conditioned living entities, because the designations of living entities are not eternal. One adjective used in this connection is nitya, which indicates eternality. Therefore, the condition of material nature immediately previous to its manifestation is called pradana. So, everything starts from the subtle stage and advances to its manifest stage. So the subtle stage is something that you cannot perceive, but it's still there. And eventually it can advance to be manifest. So to explain that, there's a special word. It's called pradana. And it says that the actual explanation of pradana, however, is given here. When the cause and effect are not clearly manifested, or the stage of avyakta, the reaction of the total elements does not take place. And that stage of material nature is called pradana. So, unless people don't really understand this, don't really want to understand it because it's too subtle, it's too refined explanation of how nature is functioning. Obviously, the nature starts as unmanifested, eternal combination of three modes. But that is the gradual cause of the manifest stage, and it's called pradana. It is called prakriti when in the manifested stage of existence. So when material nature manifests itself, then it's called prakriti. But in the unmanifest, eternal combination of three modes, which is the cause of the manifest stage, that is called the pradana. Okay, so there's an unmanifest stage of the combination of the three modes, which is the cause of the manifest stage. So the manifest stage, the unmanifest stage is called pradana. And when it becomes manifest, it's called prakriti. The Lord points out material nature in its subtle stage, which is called pradana. And he analyzes this pradana. The explanation of pradana and prakriti, that pradana, the explanation of pradana and prakriti, the explanation of pradana and prakritis, that pradana is the subtle, undifferentiated sum total of all material elements. Although they are undifferentiated, one can understand that the total material elements are contained therein. When the total material elements are manifested by the interaction of the three modes of material nature, the manifestation is called prakriti. All right, and now it says the impersonalists say that Brahman is without variegatedness and without differentiation. One may say that the pradhana is the Brahman stage, but actually, the Brahman stage is not pradhana. Pradhana is distinct from Brahman because in Brahman there is no existence of the material modes of nature. One may argue that the Mahatattva is also different from Pradhana because in the Mahatattvas there are manifestations. The actual explanation of Pradhana, however, is given here. When the cause and effect are not clearly manifested, that state is called avyakta. You can't see it, let's put it like that. The reaction of the total elements does not take place. And that stage of material nature is called pradhana. Pradhana is not the time element because in the time element, there are actions and reactions, creation and annihilation. Nor is it the jiva or marginal potency of living entities or designated condition living entities, because the designations of living entities are not eternal. One adjective used in this connection is nitya, which indicates eternality. Therefore, the condition of material nature immediately previous to its manifestation is called pradhana. There it is. So you see how subtle material nature is. And who else could make this explanation of how the material nature is working? Nobody. And all these fine differentiations, and you have different words for them, like the prakriti, the pradhana, the avyakta, and so forth. So the Lord points out material nature in its subtle stage, which is called pradhana, and analyzes this pradhana. So everything begins from the subtle stage and advances to the manifest stage. How can you explain something that is subtle? In other words, you can't actually see it, but it is there. Well, only because we're receiving transcendental knowledge from the Supreme Personality of Godhead in the Srimad Bhagavatam. So these are basically the subtle background of creation. And very few people understand this because you're going from something that is unseen to something that becomes seen. But when it's unseen, it is still existing in its primal stage or its stage before manifestation. And that's why it says pradhana is distinct from Brahman, because in Brahman there is no existence of the material modes of nature. One may argue that the Mahatattva is also different from pradhana, because in the Mahatattva there are manifestations. The actual explanation of pradhana, however, is given here. When the cause and effect are not clearly manifested, that stage is called avyakta. The reaction of the total elements does not take place. And that stage of material nature is called pradhana. Now, this pradhana is not the time element, because in the time element, there are actions and reactions, creation and annihilation. nor is it the jiva or marginal potency of living entities, or designated condition living entities, because the designations of the living entities are not eternal. One adjective used in this connection is nitya, which indicates eternality. Therefore, the condition of material nature immediately previous to its manifestation is called pradana. Okay, so it's something that is eternal, but you can't see it. But it's there. And it comes before the manifestation. So it's something very subtle.
It's I mean, it's not a complete parallel, but one way the scientists explain these black holes and anything goes into the black hole is there is no differentiation anymore.
Okay.
I'm just giving for
They keep changing
the
their
philosophy.
understanding of the
Yeah,
black hole.
yeah. That's why I mean it's not complete, but if they're exposed to the modern way, I mean there is an understanding that even in the modern way,
There's
that
something existing before.
before, but it's in a totally different form, in a subtle form.
Yes.
And then when the manifestation happens, that's when we see all these planets and universes and everything. That's what their explanation on. And they don't explain what was the reason why from that original state to this state it changes. I mean, they don't have an explanation for that. Whereas we have
the explanation here.
Yes.
The condition of material nature immediately previous to its manifestation is called pradana. So,
Pradhana is eternal, Maharaj.
Well, let's see. Here it says,
Yeah.
when the cause and effect are not clearly manifested, or I don't get this stage, the reaction of the total elements does not take place. And that stage of material nature is called pradana. Pradana is not the time element, because in the time element, there are actions and reactions, creation and annihilation. Nor is it the jiva or marginal potency living entities or designated conditioned living entities, because the designations of living entities are not eternal. One adjective used in this connection is nitya, which indicates eternality. Therefore, the condition of material nature immediately previous to its manifestation is called pradana. Yes, so pradana
When the total material
could be said to be eternal. Yeah, go ahead.
So
the
this,
total material energy is eternal, but it varies between this pradana and prakriti states.
Well, yeah, because pradana is subtle.
Yes.
And it's undifferentiated sum total of all material elements.
Yeah.
Although they are undifferentiated, one can understand that the total material elements are contained therein.
so this verse refers to the
Yeah.
planets and
No, everything, Mataji. It's just not planets. All material energy.
all material energy.
It's something that you can't see,
Mm-hmm.
but it actually exists.
Okay.
So it says, when the total material elements are manifest by the interaction of the three modes of material nature, the manifestation is called prakriti. So the explanation of pradana, however, is that pradana is the subtle, undifferentiated sum total of all material elements. Although they are undifferentiated, one can understand that the total material elements are contained therein. So this is what's existing before the manifestation of the material world.
Yeah, and material world includes those 8 elements, right, Maharaj? Like Bhumir, Apo, Anala, Vayu,
Yeah.
Kham, Mana, and
Yeah.
Buddhi and Ahankara.
But you can't see them.
Yeah. So they're all in that unmanifest state, and you can't see them, and there is no activity. That is the pradhana state. And then gradually, one by one, somewhere I think further verses, I think there is going to be explanation about how first space is created, then
Basically, okay, here's the actual definition. Therefore, the condition of material nature immediately previous, or meaning immediately before its manifestation, is called pradhana. So pradhana is something subtle, you can't see it, but it's a state of nature right before it's manifested. That's really fine differentiation. It's something you can't see, but it's there. And we're talking now about how creation takes place.
Okay, Maharaji, thank you, Hare Krishna. I guess in further verses I will understand.
yeah, there's more understanding.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So let's just read a little bit more in this verse. And yeah. So Krishna says, or the Supreme Personality Godhead says, the unmanifested eternal combination of the three modes is the cause of the manifest stage. And it's called pradhana. It is called prakriti when in the manifested stage of existence. So there you are. Pradhana is the stage right before the manifest stage of nature. So the unmanifested eternal combination of three modes is the cause of the manifest stage. And it's called pradhana.
Is that, I mean, that one statement, Maharaj, is the unmanifest is the cause of the manifest. But I thought the cause is the will of the Lord, which enters as a time element and then starts creating the manifestation.
No, well, that's why it says here that one may say that pradhana is the Brahman stage, but actually the Brahman stage is not pradhana. Pradhana is distinct from Brahman because in Brahman there is no existence of the material modes of nature. One may argue that the Mahatattva is also different from pradhana because in the Mahatattva there are manifestations. The actual explanation of pradhana, however, is given here. When the cause and effect are not clearly manifested, that stage is called avyakta. The reaction of the total elements does not take place, and that stage of material nature is called pradhana. So it's before the reaction of the modes of nature takes place. So it's something that you can't see.
Yeah, my question is specifically around like what is the cause that makes it go from pradhana to prakriti? I think I mean that's where Lord comes into picture. And my understanding was that's where it doesn't happen by itself. It's where the Lord's
Well, it's okay. There's no influence of the modes of material nature. The pradhana is distinct from Brahman because in Brahman there is no existence of the material modes of nature. One may argue that the Mahatattva, okay, wait a minute. One may say that Pradhana is the Brahman stage, but actually the Brahman stage is not Pradhana. Pradhana is distinct from Brahman because in Brahman, there is no existence of the material modes of nature. So that means in the Pradhana stage, there is the existence of material modes of nature.
Yeah, Pradhana is the material nature, but it is not in an acting state, but it is containing the material modes and everything. And yeah.
It is right before the manifest material nature. That's the Pradhana.
Yep.
The actual explanation of Pradhana, however, is given here. When the cause and effect are not clearly manifested, which is called avyakta, the reaction of the total elements does not take place. And that stage of material nature is called Pradhana. Pradhana is not the time element, because in the time element, there are actions and reactions, creation and annihilation. Nor is it the jiva or marginal potency of living entities, or designated condition living entities, because the designations of the living entities are not eternal. One adjective used in this connection is nitya, which indicates eternality. Therefore, the condition of material nature immediately previous to its manifestation is called pradhana. And pradhana is something that's eternal.
Mm-hmm. I think in the next verses there is more detail, Maharaj.
Okay,
We
so
can- I
we
think
can
to-
go on to the next verse. The aggregate elements, namely the 5 gross elements, the 5 subtle elements, the 4 internal senses, the 5 senses for gathering knowledge, and the 5 outward organs of action are known as the pradhana. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. According to Bhagavad Gita, the sum total of the 24 elements described herein is called the Yonir Mahad Brahman. The sum total of the living entities is impregnated into the Yonir Mahad Brahman, and they are born in different forms, beginning from Brahman down to the insignificant ant. In the Srimad Bhagavatam and other Vedic literatures, the sum total of the 24 elements, pradhana, is also described as Yonir Mahad Brahman. It is the source of the birth and subsistence of all living entities. So that's what the pradhana is. It is the source of the birth and subsistence of all living entities. So it's right before what you would say, therefore, the condition of material nature immediately previous to its manifestation is called pradhana. So right before material nature is manifested, that is the state of pradhana. Well, obviously, there has to be something right before the manifestation of the material world. This only is demonstrating that this material world begins in a subtle state where you can't see it, and it progresses gradually to its manifest state. So there are such things as that. Like, for example, if you're talking about, let's say, an ant, well, when ants are just born, they're very small, very, very small, and you don't really, I'm not sure if you can actually see it with the raw eye. But actually, as it begins to grow, then you're able to see it. So nature is like that. It's always going from the very subtle state to the manifest state. In the subtle state, it is still existing, but it's very difficult to see it. That's why it's called the subtle state. So there, like for example, if before the creation of the microscope, there the people didn't understand that there were microscopic entities. Once they developed the microscope, then they realized that at the base of creation or material world, there are a huge number of microscopic creatures. So that gave a more complete understanding of nature, not totally complete, but it showed that there were many things that we were not able to see with the raw eye, but those things were existing and were necessary for the maintenance or substance of the material creation. So we always begin from the subtle stage and we go to the manifest stage. That's the way nature works. That's why it says here that, just 1 second. It says that pradhana, the actual explanation of pradhana, however, is given here. When the cause and effect are not clearly manifested, so that stage is called avyakta. You can't see it. The reaction of the total elements does not take place. And that stage of material nature is called pradhana. Pradhana is not the time element, because in the time element, there are actions and reactions, creation and annihilation. Nor is it the jiva or the marginal potency of the living entities, or designated conditioned living entities, because the designations of living entities are not eternal. One adjective used in this connection is nitya, which indicates eternality. Therefore, the condition of material nature immediately previous to its manifestation is called pradhana. Obviously, you can't see it because it's the state of matter immediately before its manifestation.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Yeah.
In kids classes, when you used to take kids classes,
What?
when you were teaching kids classes back then,
Yeah.
so you used to give the example of the mic that you were using, and you used to say, if you look at the mic, but the mic is actually made out of some iron, many other elements which were not together at one point, but they all come together and they manifest as a mic.
Yeah.
So you used to give that example, and you also used to give the example of some jewelry made out of gold, and but that means the gold exists. There is some element which is there, and but it manifested into jewelry.
Exactly. The gold, if the gold was always there, and then now you made it into ring, you made it into necklace and all kinds of things, but it is from the gold. So in its original form, that gold can be compared to this pradhan stage of the material nature. And then as it starts manifesting into all these elements, then it becomes more of a prakriti, because that's the activated state of the same thing.
And then again, everything goes back to gold.
Yeah, when you can melt it all and then go back to the undifferentiated gold state. So just for analogy, I mean, it's not this 100% because in this case, gold can be still be perceived, whereas here pradhana cannot be perceived. It's very subtle.
It is basically the condition of material nature immediately previous or before to its
Yeah.
manifestation.
Yeah.
That's called pradhana. It is a very refined understanding of how nature is working.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Yes.
So Maharaj, Dandot Pranam Maharaj. This is Pradyumna Das. So Maharaj, based on, so what is it the correct understanding that pradhana is, as you is mentioned here, is a in very subtle state without any manifestation, right? So it's probably the stage before. So why? How do you differentiate between Mahat Tattva and pradhana? This like pradhana plus time factor is equal to Mahat Tattva. Is
Correct.
that the right understanding? When because Krishna glances towards the Mahatattva to have agitated and this Prakriti or whole manifestation happens, right? So Pradhana is just the before stage where before the time factor goes into that. And when the time factor goes into that, it becomes Mahatattva.
Yeah.
Is that right understanding?
Pradhana is not the time element.
Yes, I'm talking about the Pradhana plus time factor is equal to Mahatattva. So pradhana is yes, unmanifested thing or material elements in unmanifested form. There is no manifestation just before the manifestation happens. Where the mahat we call is mahat tattva, where Lord glances to agitate that mahat tattva to form this all manifestation, right? So actually, what it happens is that the time factor goes into this pradhana, which converts that or treat as a mahat tattva.
The time element is not working yet.
Yeah, he is saying that there is pradhana where the time element is not there. When you add time element, that's when it becomes Mahat Tattva. I think that's what Bhagavatam, like there's more explanation. In the following verses, there is more clarity, Maharaj. I think we need to go through some more for all of this to make sense more. But it is true, I think, Prabhuji. You understand what I...
Okay. So pradhana is distinct from Brahman because in Brahman there is no existence of material modes. One may argue that Mahatattva is also different from pradhana because in Mahatattva there are manifestations. The actual explanation of pradhana, however, is given here. When the cause and effect are not clearly manifest, that stage is called avyam. The reaction of the total elements does not take place. And that stage of material nature is called pradhana. Pradhana is not the time element because in the time element there are actions and reactions, creation and annihilation. Nor is it the jiva or marginal potency of living entities or designated condition of living entities, because the designations of living entities are not eternal. One adjective used in this connection is nitya, which indicates eternality. Therefore, the condition of material nature immediately previous to its manifestation is called pradhana, and it's something that's eternal.
So, Maharaj, I just asked our Veda base.
Okay.
Is that okay if I read?
Yes.
Yeah. So I asked this question about what is the difference between pradhana, mahatattva, and prakriti?
Mhm.
Because those are the three words. And then I think we can also add Brahman. But at least these three, which are all material aspects. So the terms pradhana, mahatattva, and prakriti are all central concepts in Vedic cosmology and describe different stages are aspects of material energy in the process of creation. While they are interconnected, they represent distinct phases and roles in the transformation of material nature under the direction of Krishna. So, number one, Pradhana. Pradhana definition is the unmanifested, undifferentiated state of the total material energy. It is the most subtle form of matter where the three modes of the material nature, goodness, passion, and ignorance, exist in equilibrium. Characters.
They're not functioning.
They're not functioning, yes. Characteristics. It is inert and inactive on its own. It contains all material elements in a latent, unmanifested state. Exists before creation begins when the material energy is in its potential form.
In other words, it's subtle.
Yes. Role in creation. When Krishna glances at Pradhana, his energy in the form of time and consciousness agitates it, breaking the balance of the three modes and initiating creation. This interaction transforms Pradhana into Mahatattva. So now Mahatattva. Mahatattva is the first manifestation of material creation formed when Pradhana becomes agitated by Krishna's glance. It represents the universal cosmic intelligence or the total material energy in its manifested state. Characteristics. The three modes of material nature, sattva, rajas, tama, become active and begin interacting. It is the foundation upon which the material universe is built. Mahatattva is also referred to as the great principle or the cosmic intelligence and serves as the blueprint for creation. Role in creation. Mahatattva gives rise to false ego, ahankara, which further differentiates into elements of material nature, mind, senses, gross matter, and so on. It is the first step in the manifestation of tangible material worlds. And it's actually going to be covered in the 19th verse of this particular chapter, it seems. The Mahatattva, 26:19. The Mahatattva, or the great causal truth, transforms into material ego, which manifests as the subtle elements, gross elements, and the senses. Next is Prakriti. Prakriti refers to the material nature in its active and dynamic state. It is the working material energy that manifests the physical universe and sustains the creation. Characteristics. Prakriti operates under the three modes of the material nature, goodness, passion, and ignorance. It is both the cause and the effect of the material manifestations. Unlike Pradhana, which is inert and inactive, Prakriti is the energized and functioning aspect of the material nature. Role in the creation. Prakriti is responsible for manifesting the gross and subtle material elements like the Panch Mahabhutas as well as the subtle body, earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and false ego. It is what we perceive as the material world, governed by time and karma. So that's, in a summary, basically how they work together. Pradhana is the dormant potential energy of the material creation. When activated by Krishna, Pradhana becomes Mahatattva, the blueprint for material manifestation. And from Mahatattva, the functional material world, Prakriti, emerges, comprising of the gross and subtle elements that create the universes. So
And that's basically what this verse is saying.
Correct.
This text then says, the unmanifested eternal combination of three modes is the cause of the manifest stage, and it's called pradhana. It is called prakriti when in the manifested stage of existence. So everything goes from the subtle stage to the manifest stage. And so the pradhana says the unmanifested eternal combination of three modes is the cause of the manifest stage, and it's called pradhana. It is called prakriti when in the manifested stage of existence. So everything begins from the subtle stage and goes
To grow.
gradually to the manifest stage. So, in other words, the Lord points out material nature in its subtle stage, which is called pradhana. And he analyzes this pradhana. The explanation of pradhana and prakriti. That pradhana is the subtle, undifferentiated sum total of all material elements. Although they are undifferentiated, one can understand that the total material elements are contained therein. When the total material elements are manifested by the interaction of the three modes of material nature, the manifestation is called prakriti. One may say that pradhana is the Brahman stage, but actually Brahman stage is not pradhana. Pradhana is distinct from Brahman because in Brahman there is no existence of the material modes of nature. One may argue that the Mahatattva is also different from pradhana because in the Mahatattva there are manifestations. The actual explanation of pradhana, however, is given here. When the cause and effect are not clearly manifest, it's called avyakta. The reaction of the total elements does not take place. And that stage of material nature is called pradhana. Pradhana is not the time element because in the time element there are actions and reactions, creation and annihilation. Nor is it the jiva or the marginal potency of living entities or designated conditioned living entities, because the designations of living entities are not eternal. One adjective used in this connection is nitya, which indicates eternality. Therefore, the condition of material nature immediately previous or before to its manifestation is called pradhana. Okay, here it is. Pradhana is the stage or the condition of material nature immediately before its manifestation. And it's called pradhana. So these are all the fine points of material creation. Obviously, everything goes from the subtle state to the manifest state in nature. Therefore, many things are not understood. That's why scientists sometimes are not so interested in the origin or the finality of things. They're interested in the middle, when things are actually capable of being perceived and documented, right? And how can you document the pradhana stage? Because you can't actually see it. The actual explanation of pradhana, however, is given here when the cause and effect are not clearly manifested. The reaction of the total elements does not take place, and the stage of material nature is called. And that stage of material nature is called pradhana. Pradhana is not the time element, because in the time element, There are actions and reactions, creation and annihilation, nor is it the jiva or marginal potency of living entities, or designated condition of living entities, because the designation of living entities are not eternal. One adjective used in this connection is nitya, which indicates eternality. Therefore, the condition of material nature immediately previous to its manifestation is called pradhana. Okay. It's the state of nature before you can actually see it, but it's existing.
Yes.
Haribol.
Very well. I think there is one other question that may be relevant. Surendra, you want to ask your question?
Yeah, definitely. So, Hare Krishna Maharaj. So my question is, if one performs the duty or task at hand for the importance of the duty, not for the material modes, does this mean they transcend their material mode? So, am I audible, Chaks Prabhu?
Yeah.
You're talking about transcending the material modes of nature. Is that right?
Yeah.
You can only transcend the material modes of material nature by engaging in pure devotional service without any motive. The only purpose is to please Krishna, and it has to be done with love and devotion. That is the transcendental stage.
Yeah. So, I mean, similar to the Arjuna's question, like to fight in the Kurukshetra war or not, like, so Arjuna's, I mean, Lord Krishna's advice is to do your dharma. As a Kshatriya, that you do war, right? In the similar terms, in the similar terms, like in our day-to-day life, if one performs their duty, like, household duty or, at work, the task at hand, they perform for the importance of the task, not the material modes, like, what is in good for me, or like, is it a good job, do I do, ignore something like these three material modes. So my question is, does this mean they transcend their material mode?
The main point of devotional service is surrendering to Krishna. You can do so many activities without surrendering to Krishna. So surrendering to Krishna means you're in a personal relationship with the Lord, and you do not do anything without the sanction of the Lord, without the, let's say, permission of the Lord. So most people don't reach that stage because of their false ego. But a devotee will not do anything without permission of the Lord. So that differentiates what is pure devotional service to what it is service, but not necessarily pure devotional service. There are a lot of people that are doing service in this world, but devotional service means you only do things that are permitted and by the Lord and are meant to please the Lord. So most people act to please themselves or their relatives or some other outside thing. But the devotee will only do things that are pleasing for the Lord and are bona fide. by the Shastras. So that's the difference between a devotee and someone who is not actually a devotee. The devotee will not do anything that is not permitted by the Lord. And before he does anything, he gets the permission of the Lord and validation by the spiritual spiritual uh, uh, the
Spiritual master.
spiritual master. Yeah.
Yeah, Maharaj, one question. To contextualize that, contextualize the meaning of what you said. See, I'm a father. I have a son who is not behaving properly. Let's take that as an example, right?
Yes.
Should I discipline him or not discipline him?
Your duty is to train him.
I agree. Like sometimes, the because of whatever the influences, like, the worldly influences is out of my hand. So how should I proceed?
Well, let's say he's 6 years old. You can discipline him.
Yeah, I
Let's
mean,
say,
I have a teenage son, so a teenage daughter. So yeah, so they are out of that hand.
yeah. So now you have to convince them,
Okay.
not by severe discipline, but you have to convince them by logic and Shastra and so forth. Now, if they don't accept Shastra, there's not much you can do.
Yeah, I saw what even in these days, like, compared to my childhood and this generation of kids, I mean, probably my parents also thought the same thing. So it is challenge. I mean, everybody in the in the meeting can understand what I'm saying. So sometimes they test the limits.
It's because of modern education. That's why I always say don't put your kids in school because they're not going to be educated properly. They're going to be conditioned to be karmis, to who consider that sense gratification is the goal of life. And they're not interested in tapasya. They're interested in enjoying the fruits of the material sense gratification. So as soon as you put them in school, by the influence of other kids in school and influence of the general educational system itself, they're convinced that the goal of life is sense gratification. So then it's very difficult to educate them in Krishna consciousness.
Yeah. So what my takeaway is, like, logically, like, rationally, have a conversation with the teenager to show the big picture. Yeah, sometimes it is very hard, Maharaj, like, so yeah.
No, but it's because of the educational system in this let's say in Seattle or the United States. So you have to save your child from being in contact with the bogus educational system in modern world, and you have to educate the child at home, not put him in school, because as soon as you put the child in the school, he comes in contact with so much speculation, all aiming at sense gratification as the actual purpose of life.
Yeah.
There's no tapasya involved. There's no controlling the senses involved in that, let's say, ambience. It's
I
all about.
100% agree with you, Maharaj. It's a kind of rat race. Like when people talk about grades and other stuff, ranks, it's a rat race.
It's a what?
It's a rat race.
Rat race.
Oh, rat race.
Yeah.
Well, the rats are the karmi teachers, and they're racing to gain control of your son's mind and filling your son's mind up with all kinds of speculation, and all leading to becoming a sense gratifier. If you're not a sense gratifier, let's say the material edifice of eating, sleeping, mating, and defending, having nice cars, having nice houses, having nice this, nice that, the whole thing would fail. The whole thing would collapse. Everything depends on capitalism, where people work hard, earn money, and spend money. That whole system would collapse if everyone becomes devotees.
That
You see?
is true.
Yeah,
The whole economy or whatever, the capitalistic society is dependent on people working hard and spending.
exactly. Exactly. There's no going to the what do you call it? The to Costco. Costco is the perfect example of the control of people by claiming that they can get things a little cheaper, and there's an infinite variety of things that you can buy there. So as soon as you walk into Costco, you're in Maya's grip, and you're going to end up buying things. Like one man, he went to Costco. His wife told him, "Go to Costco. They have bananas on sale. They're really cheap. Go buy the bananas." So he goes, but to get to the bananas, he has to walk through the whole,
Television.
he has to walk the back of Costco to get to the bananas. But by the time he got to the bananas, he already bought a television and and other gadgets. And as he comes home, and the wife said, "Did you get the bananas?" He said, "Oh my God, I forgot. But I got a television." You see? So uh, the whole edifice of the box stores is to inspire you to buy things that you don't really need, that you could get along without, but you become attracted to them. So it's better not to go to the box stores. It's better to stay at home and think more clearly about what you really need. Because most of the things you buy in the box stores, you don't really need, but they're attractive. And that by that attraction, you end up buying things that you think that you absolutely need, and you got a cheaper price for them at the box store. But the whole thing is illusory. Now, if you go back to, let's say we go back to the caveman uh, time, when people were living, in nature. They still existed. They were eating, they were sleeping, they were mating, and they were defending. And they had some way of protecting themselves and so forth. So they had a society, and it was functioning, right? Now, fast forward today, you have Costco, you have other box stores, you have the internet, and it's all based on convincing you to buy things that maybe you don't need. Maybe there's some of the things you need, but most things you don't really need it, but you're attracted to it. Like a new television or a new cell phone or a new this or that. And one day I was giving a lecture in Seattle, and I was talking about how it's complete nonsense to buy a 96-inch television. And as soon as I was saying that, the person who owned the house, he walked in with a brand new 96-inch television. he had stepped out to go buy that television because it was on sale. And just at the point where I was talking about how it's nonsense to buy a 96-inch television, he walked in with the television.
Yeah, most times people are not intentional, Maharaj. Like it's more influenced. It's a commercialization of things. They're
Well, it's
not asking,
conditioning. It's conditioning.
why do I need TV? Why do I need a new car,
Yes.
a new phone every 2 years? I mean,
A new car, a new phone, a new wife, a
yeah.
new
So Western world, like
yes,
definitely, yeah. So yeah,
everything has to be new. But actually, like Warren Buffett, look at him. He has an old car that's been driving for, I don't know, maybe 50 years or
yeah.
maybe less.
He's living in the
And
same home. Like he never upgraded his phone. So
yeah, so it's not that, he's behind the times. He's one of the richest men in the world. But he doesn't see the need to buy all these new gadgets.
yeah,
So when you walk into the let's say Costco, you're walking into a danger zone because you will definitely buy some things that you don't need. You buy other things that you think you need, but you also will buy other things that you don't really need. The
yeah.
whole
Most people buy more than $40-50 than what they plan to buy there.
exactly, exactly. The whole way it's planned is to get you to buy things that you don't really need. And it's psychologically organized. The
Yeah,
setup of Costco's psychologically organized. If you want to buy some bananas, you would have to probably walk through all the store to
they
get
put
to
it
the
at the
banana.
extreme end. The extreme end they put is the toilet paper. Because that people they know that they definitely go for it.
Yeah. So they don't have to put it on sale or anything, right?
Yeah.
Toilet paper is a big thing. Whenever there's uh, fear that there's going to be, real bad weather, or there's going to be some
Yeah.
kind of,
Anytime there is a storm or some kind of fear of any type.
what do they do? People buy all the toilet paper.
Yeah. During COVID, that was the another.
Yeah. People can't live without toilet paper, but actually you can. I mean, you just wash your butt with water or take a bath every time you pass stool. But no, people have to have the toilet paper.
Yeah. Warren Buffett in 1958, he bought a home for about 31,500,
Hmm.
and he still lives in the same home now.
There you are. He could buy a home that's worth, $20 million if you wanted to.
Mm-hmm. And then with respect to cars, he says he drives the same car until they're no longer functional.
Right.
So
Yeah, there's a proverb in your uh, in your um, in your prominent
in your frugal days,
in opposite.
the opposite, yeah.
Yeah.
In your Opulent days.
Opulent days, live frugally, so that in frugal days you can live opulent.
Yeah. Good one.
So, I mean, Warren Buffett, another important fact was that every morning he just takes exact change for the breakfast. And he eats the same breakfast every day.
Well, yeah, there are people like that. There was this Armenian guy called Gulbenkian. He was one of the richest men in the world, like 50, 60 years ago. He would weigh his food every day before he would eat. And he wouldn't eat more than 1 pound of food. So he had a scale, and he would weigh the food, and then he would eat it. Very, very strict man. Of course, he still got old and died, just like anyone else. But he was very, disciplined, especially when it came to his diet. He still ate meat, but he wouldn't eat a lot of meat. He would eat just so much. So he was very disciplined. My uncle also, one of my uncles, he was very disciplined. He would wake up every morning around 4 o'clock. How do I know? Because every summer I would stay with him for about a week or two in his house. And he would wake up very early in the morning, around 4 o'clock, and he would go down to the kitchen and he would start dicing the vegetables that he was going to eat. So I asked him, I said, Uncle G, I said, how come you cutting your vegetables in such small pieces? And he said, oh, I do that because I don't want my stomach to work overtime. I want to be able to digest very quickly. So he would wake up 4 o'clock in the morning, and instead of going to Mangalarti or chanting Hare Krishna, he would spend about an hour cutting his vegetables very thinly and very meticulously, so that he would not overstress his what do you call it, digestive tract.
System, yeah.
So how did he learn that? I guess he figured it out on his own, because he wanted to live to be over 100. He wanted to actually live to be 100, 120 years old. Now, what was his downfall? His downfall was that he had a wife who found out. My uncle was a tailor, and he had a tailor shop, and he was very frugal. So when other people didn't have much money, like in the 1920s and 30s, he had a lot of money because he was very frugal and he worked really hard. But one day his wife found out that he had some kind of an affair with another woman. So from that point on, she decided to torture him by nagging him and criticizing him and so forth. So he would wake up every morning around 4 o'clock. He was very strict about getting up early. But why would he get up early? He would go down to the kitchen and start cutting his vegetables very thinly. And I asked him, I said, why are you doing that? He said, I don't want my stomach to work overtime to digest food. So that's how meticulous he was, right? And his goal was to live to be 120 or more. And he would have reached that goal. But what happened to him was that after his wife found out that he had had some kind of an affair with another woman, that was like maybe 50 years ago, she basically tortured him, badgered him, always uh, pushed his buttons, got him angry. So one day she pushed his buttons so badly that he stood up, grabbed his coat, and walked out of the house, slammed the door, and as he was crossing the street, he was so angry at his wife, he didn't look, and he got run over by a bus. So his goal of reaching 120 years ended right there. Right?
Mm.
Now, because he was so disciplined, and he was like 80 years old at that time, but he was like a young kid, very healthy. Everything. Got run over by that bus, and he still survived 3 weeks, and then he died. What was his downfall? It was not his diet. His diet was very good. His discipline was very good, but he couldn't control his anger. And his wife was an expert at pushing his buttons to get him angry. So every day, as soon as she would come down around 3:30, about 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock in the morning. He would get up 4 o'clock. As soon as she would come down, they'd start arguing. And the argument would last all day long. And when I stayed with them for about a week or two once, I saw that they were arguing all the time. As soon as she would walk down, she wouldn't come down until around 7:30 in the morning. He would get up 4 o'clock in the morning. And they would just argue all the time. It was like torture. And one day he couldn't stand it anymore. And he just got his coat and slammed the door, walked outside, didn't look left or right, and got run over by a bus. And he never made it over, 78 years old or 80 years old. And his goal was to live to be 120 or more.
So Maharaj, I mean, in this situation, right? I mean, I think like even in the modern times, like many couples, right? I'm just contemplating, like, why don't people sit together and, I mean, everybody has their past, and we are not perfect. I mean, we lived in a material world, and we fall from, like, for various reasons. That, I mean, why can't people sit together and discuss? Right, in this scenario, it's an example, right?
Well, let me ask you a question. Can you sit down and discuss with your wife?
Yeah, I'm doing my best in that case. Like, I know we don't agree on many things, but I mean, I'm not afraid of discussing things.
Well, that's good. That's good.
Right.
But
Definitely, I mean, because we came from two different walks of life, like definitely there is disagreements. But I mean, when it comes to consciousness and future direction, like I always encourage, even with my kids, even they are teenagers and they don't we don't align in some of the upbringing principles, but I still like to have a rational discussion on things.
well, that's good. That's very good. But does your wife agree with you always?
Not always, like, I mean, we don't agree on things, but at least my effort is to understand. We don't need to agree on everything, but at least understand each other's positions, and then, think about what the next move, like, next step, right? It is a journey rather than, some fixed viewpoint. At least, I
Well,
mean, I wanted to put honestly, like, from my perspective, like, I put my effort, like, 100% to understand the other person point of view. Whether I agree or disagree, it's a choice. But, I always make sure that I give whatever I have in that moment to understand the opposite point of view.
well, the best policy is to surrender.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, right? I don't argue. Like, sometimes I don't argue. Sometimes when it is important to me, I will argue. Like, not argue in the sense, I'll try to go by data. Like I try whatever the data I have at my hand at that point of time, like yes.
The whole point is, who is the boss? So the women want to surrender to their husband, and they usually do early on when they get married. But as time goes on, they want to be the boss.
Yeah, I never had that view, Maharaj. I mean, I always see that we are kind of partners, and so we have equal say, but at the same time, in the given moment, like we should make the best decision.
You should make what?
The best choice, like, for the given situation.
Okay. Well, does your wife always agree with you?
We will always discuss. I mean, we have our own things, like not always, like, definitely people, two different people agreeing on same thing, but critical things we both agree.
Okay. That's why you're still together, probably. Okay, so anyway, the main thing is that when a husband and wife are both surrendered to Krishna, they'll live together peacefully. If one of the two is not surrendered to Krishna, it's going to be difficult to live together. If both are not surrendered to Krishna, they might be able to live together also. But if one is surrendered to Krishna and the other isn't, it's going to be difficult. So, ideally, if husband and wife are both surrendered to Krishna, then they can do remarkable things with each other, working cooperatively to please Krishna. So that should be the goal in marriage. Not to be surrendered to Costco or some nonsense thing. We should be surrendered to Krishna together, husband and wife, and work together to please Krishna and Guru. Then you'll have a very peaceful life.
So next
So
upcoming, we have a
arguing is the worst thing you can do. Arguing is the worst thing you can do. It only poisons the atmosphere in the house. Arguing. So it's better to just surrender, and not be adamant about things.
And you're speaking with surrender now.
Yes.
Maharaj keeps giving an example of surrender not.
Yeah, the British called him, his name was Surrender, right? Yeah. And no, his name was Surendranath. Yeah.
Even Prabhu's name is fully Surendranath.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So then the British gave him the name Surrender Not.
Okay, so it's about time.
Thank you very much. All glories to Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. So our takeaway today is that takeaway today. The actual explanation of pradhana, however, is given here. When the cause and effect are not clearly manifested, that's called avyakta. The reaction of the total elements does not take place. And that stage of material nature is called pradhana. Pradhana is not the time element, because in the time element, there are actions and reactions, creation and annihilation. Nor is it the jiva or marginal potency of living entity, or designated condition of living entities, because the designations of living entities are not eternal. One adjective used in this connection is nitya, indicates eternality. Therefore, the condition of material nature immediately previous to its manifestation is called pradhana. Now, all these words, pradhana and Brahman and so forth, they're all being very carefully uh, um, analyzed to understand what these terms mean. People could go through their whole life reading Shastra and not really understand what pradhana means or what Brahman means. So here Prabhupada is giving very clear definition of what is pradhana. What it is and what it isn't, because he defines both. So what is pradhana? The actual explanation of pradhana, however, is given here. When the cause and effect are not clearly manifested, that stage is called avyakta. The reaction to the total elements does not take place, and that stage of material nature is called pradhana. Now he explains what pradhana is not. Pradhana is not the time element, because in the time element there are actions and reactions, creation and annihilation. Nor is it the jiva or marginal potency of living entities, or designated producing living entities. Because the designation of living entities is not eternal. One adjective used in this connection is nitya, which is eternity. Therefore, the condition of material nature immediately previous to its manifestation is called pradhana. Prabhupada nailed it. Hare Krishna. Oh, word Srila Prabhupada ki jai.